welcome to the deep dive. You sent us some really thought-provoking material. A bit challenging, maybe.
Definitely. It's from a piece called Unchanging Nature of Slaves and Masters.
Right. So our plan today is to sort of unpack the main idea, this quotation that's central to it.
Look at the examples the source uses, which are pretty varied.
And then, importantly, get into the source's own critique of that very idea.
Exactly. This is your material, so we want to explore these different layers with you.
Okay, so let's start with the core concept. It hinges on one specific quote, doesn't it?
It does. It's potent. Those who are by nature slaves will change only their masters, not their nature.
Wow. Okay. Heavy stuff. What exactly does the source mean by nature versus masters here?
Well, the text suggests nature is like those deep-seated tendencies, patterns of behavior, things that feel almost fundamental. And masters, that's the external stuff, circumstances, people, systems you depend on or interact with.
So the quote's basically saying, some core behaviors are so fixed that just changing your situation, or who's in charge, won't touch them.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the source itself notes this is, a negative view, kind of deterministic.
Yeah, it implies the internal part is much stronger than the outside influences. And the source gives concrete examples, right, to show how this might play out.
It does. It tries to ground it, like dependency in relationships.
Oh, so.
Someone might leave, say, a controlling partner, a difficult situation, but then they find themselves in another relationship with, well, a similar dynamic. The source hints the underlying nature. There could be maybe a deep need for validation from others or maybe a fear of being truly autonomous.
So they change the person, the master, but the pattern itself repeats.
That's the idea presented, yeah.
And this isn't just personal relationships. The source takes it into the workplace, too.
Right. It describes someone who always feels, taken advantage of at work, always complaining about the boss, the company policy. They switch jobs, new company, new supervisor. But somehow they end up feeling the same way. Same issues crop up.
Interesting. So the nature in that case might be, what, a victim mentality maybe? Or resistance to taking responsibility?
The source floats possibilities like that. Again, the idea is the master, the job changes, but the internal perception or approach doesn't.
And it connects this to addiction as well. That seems like a common example of hard-to-break patterns.
Yes, definitely. The material mentions someone overcoming, say, a substance addiction, getting rid of that specific master, only to then develop a really intense compulsion for something else, gambling maybe, or even over-exercising, something different.
So the nature isn't the specific drug, but the underlying compulsion, the need for something external to cope.
That's what the source suggests. The specific master changes, but the addictive cycle, that core pattern, just finds a new outlet.
And it scales this idea way up, too, to politics and society, which feels quite bleak.
It does. It talks about societies overthrowing an oppressive regime, changing the master in a big way.
Right. A revolution or major shift.
But then sometimes, eventually, they find themselves under a different kind of repressive system. Maybe not identical, but still limiting freedom.
And the proposed nature there would be, what? Something collective.
It's harder to pin down, as the source implies. Could be things like ingrained deference to authority, or maybe civic apathy, fear, things within the population itself that allow a new form of control to take root.
Okay, so the source lays out this really challenging framework with these vivid, kind of uncomfortable examples.
Yeah.
But then, and this seems crucial, the source itself steps back and says, wait a minute.
Exactly. This is really important. After building this case, the material explicitly says, look, this quotation is an overgeneralization. It pushes back.
So it's not endorsing that fatalistic view wholeheartedly.
Not at all. The critique within the source stresses that people are way more complex. We can change significantly.
It emphasizes growth, learning.
Maturation, yeah. Breaking patterns. The source highlights that people absolutely do evolve. Our temperaments, our outlooks, they aren't necessarily fixed forever. It directly counters that unchanging nature idea.
So you're left with this tension then between these persistent seeming patterns.
And the reality that people and societies do have a capacity for real change and growth.
Right. The source presents both sides of that coin.
It really does. And grappling with that tension seems to be the point. It wants you to see the pull of the pattern, but also the potential for breaking it.
So reflecting on all this, thinking about your source material, what's the big takeaway for you, the listener?
Well, considering that initial challenging idea and the source's own important critique,
Yeah.
it sort of leaves you asking, doesn't it? When you face a stubborn problem, personally or even collectively, is the real work changing the master, the external situation?
Or is it about changing the nature, that deeper tendency?
Or maybe, just maybe, real lasting change needs you to tackle both. Something to think about based on what your source laid out for us.